All right. What is going on, dudes? We are live. We are back with another Universal Man podcast. It's been a little while since I've done these, since I started off this year doing the daily videos and whatnot. You know, I was doing kind of like your standard upload sort of thing where, I would just sit down, me and my camera, record the content, upload it, and then just, walk away. And after doing so many of them, it's just like, it's hard to get excited when it's just me and the camera. Like I don't know. I just like lost the energy, but like doing it live, there's just a little bit of extra, oomph, a little ooh-yop in it, And, I hope you guys dug the intro music there. That was actually created by a really good friend of mine, Brian Hegney. You can look him up on Instagram. His name is Now That I Am, all one word. And so if you dug that, check him out because he helped me out with that intro music. So today we're going to be covering a couple of different things. I've got the next episode of the Psychomagnetic Self-Talk series. I've got the next one of the Red Pill Playbook series. And then I've got a whole host of Q&A questions from the Vanguard. So if you guys ever want to submit your questions, like there's honestly just too much for me to keep up with on the YouTube, timeline here, or the YouTube chat. I've got the Discord for the Vanguard up too. So if you guys are a Vanguard member, go ahead and post in the Universal Man content thread, and I'll be covering the Q&A stuff as well. So first off, I'm going bald. I didn't think I was going bald. I just thought I had a widow's peak, and I always have sort of, but I was sort of actually started going bald. I knew it was starting to be an issue when someone in the comments said that, hey, Mark, could you do a video on balding? You make it look good, by the way. I was like, oh shit. I thought I was just cutting my hair short. Maybe I'm going bald. And I started to look at it. I was like, yeah, maybe I am. And I decided to go all in. Gonna shave it up. I feel like if you're going bald, just trying to make a balding head of hair work, I don't know. I feel like it's tricky to pull off. It's a tricky one to pull off and make look good. So I'm just like, you know what? I guess I'm just done with hair. Kind of a weird thing to say goodbye to. Maybe I'll bring it back. But I don't know if this part here goes, and then you got just one knot of hair, then a bald spot, and then more hair. You got that little island head look going. That's maybe some people can make it work. That's just not what I'm trying to rep. So anyway, here, let's go ahead and talk about, what are we doing? Right. We're going to do the self-talk series. Okay. So today we're going to be continuing episode 3 of the Psychomagnetic Self-Talk series. And this is designed to really help you shift what you're emotionally attracted to and repelled by, so that you can then shift the kinds of results that you attract or repel through your actions, right? So it's figuring out how can we move our emotions around intentionally by the way that we interact with ourselves. And if we can do that, well, then we can probably get some good stuff happening in our life, take some good action and that sort of thing. And in this episode, I don't know if we call it episode, call it an entry, call it, whatever, we're going to be talking about the idea of resonance. And resonance, I think, is super important to understand anytime you're dealing with any sort of internal work, because if you don't get this concept, then you're going to be really hamstringing your efforts in a significant way. So you can think of resonance as just a form of alignment or misalignment. Okay, it's kind of like the greater resonance that you are experiencing, the more flow, ease, and power that you feel. So you can think of flow states as states of resonance, right? And there's different kinds of resonance. So we've got mental resonance, and that would be when you feel something is true. It sounds true, right? That there's a click there, right? There's emotional resonance where you feel something, it's I want this thing, or I feel that opinion, or I feel that desire, or whatever, okay? So you're running on the emotional level. Physical resonance is when you're just kind of doing something, right? So, I'm in the physical resonance of sitting in a chair right now looking into a camera, all right? And then I would say there's even a deeper form of resonance, almost like a essential resonance or spiritual resonance that's different a little bit. Maybe even you call it intuitive resonance. It's different than like emotional, but it's kind of like that. So for example, like if you have a craving for something that you know is not really authentic, like maybe you got a craving for, watching porn or, eating some, a bunch of junk food, like you might be emotionally resonant with that idea. But then if you really kind of tuned into yourself, it's like, is that really what you want? And then there'd be a part that's like, no. And so that's like the deeper sort of, I think of it as spiritual resonance, but maybe you can think of it as intuitive resonance as well, or essential resonance. And then obviously we got the circumstantial stuff. So it's like, how you are interfacing with your reality around you, right? So the opposite of resonance is dissonance, okay, when you're at odds with things. And so I want to walk through just a couple examples here to help you get where I'm going with this. So we just talked about circumstantial resonance. So a state of circumstantial dissonance would be where mentally, emotionally, physically, you're aligned, but your environment is blocking you. So for example, maybe you're ready to take off on building your side business, but your wife just had a baby and you need to help take care of her and the baby. So like, on one level, you're totally ready to kick ass on your side business, but circumstances are just not so to support you in that. So you'd be dissonant in that regard, unless you kind of shifted your intention and kind of adapted to where you're at. Okay. Now, one of the most common kinds of dissonance that we run into is when we start, when we rationally click with something and maybe we physically understand what we're supposed to do and want to do it, but like emotionally something's off. So that's what happens when someone's engaging in white knuckling or they're forcing things, okay? So for example, like say you got to do some work or you have a project, all right? Emotionally, it's like doing that project's the last thing that you want to do. It's like emotionally you just want to, watch TV and have fun and do anything else other than work on your project. But rationally, you have to, and physically you're quite capable of doing it. And so it's like you have to force through, right? You have to, anytime there's dissonance that you experience, particularly, on the emotional level, like you're going to have to just kind of force through it unless you can shift something on that emotional level, right? And so this is where self-talk comes in. Self-talk gives us a tool set to shift how we resonate with things, okay? And what I see a lot of is guys engaging in self-talk in a dissonant manner, in a way that causes them to clash with themselves, and they don't really get very far with their self-talk. So this would be someone who just tries to bully themselves, right? Okay, they just maybe they're just like, you better do this thing or else you suck, right? We talk about this in my Omni-Game series. This is a vacuous sort of intention and motivation and whatnot, right? And so that's, can be very dissonant. It's just kind of about squashing the emotion, okay? Another way would be someone who just is very mechanical with it. And it's okay to be a little mechanical in the beginning. Maybe you're just trying to try it out and whatever. But some people, they just repeat affirmations or they just say like one little script over and over again to themselves. And they think that that's going to impact their emotionality. And it's not really, maybe once in a while it'll help, but like it's not really connected. It's just kind of firing off, right? So you want to always think about your relationship with yourself in the same way that you think about your relationship with other people, okay? Like if we were going to have a conversation and I just, railroaded you in the conversation, I just kind of talked over you, I just ignored what you said and just like talked about whatever I wanted to talk about, you wouldn't really enjoy the conversation very much. In fact, you would probably start tuning out and, if it kept up, you'd probably want to avoid interacting with me, period, right? And if that's the case, then you're going to be really sort of struggling to get anywhere in that kind of conversation together, right? It's going to be an issue. So, you want to be talking to yourself in the same way as if you were trying to have a productive conversation with other people. And this is where the main point of this video comes in, which is the idea of centered self-talk. So what does that mean? What does that mean? So when we're doing centered self-talk, what we're trying to do is establish a core bit of resonance, like some common ground between the different aspects of our psyche and circumstances, so that we all have a starting point. All our parts have like one point from where they're starting on the same page, and then we can then move from there. So if we're going to do the analog between me talking with someone else, it's similar to the idea of pacing and leading, which is a conversational tactic, or mirroring, if you've heard of that before. It's the idea that, like, all right, say someone comes to me and they're upset. Before I just give them advice, like if I just say, like if I just write them up, be like, oh, don't be upset, do this instead, or, like, oh, that's silly for you to be upset. You should, approach it from this perspective. Like that's going to kind of shut them down. That's going to immediately create some sort of disconnect between them, or between us, and I'm not going to be able to help them as much. Back before I got trained as a coach, this is what I would do when I would try and like help people or whatever, is I would just, basically shut them down, override them, that sort of thing. But what I learned is that you have to create some kind of shared energetic space. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through acknowledging and validating where someone's at. So it's like, say someone comes to me and they're upset. I say, hey, why are you upset? And I try to understand it. And then I say, you know what? From that perspective, I totally get where you're coming from. I would be upset, if I was looking at it that way too. Or, like I'm not saying that they're right necessarily, but I'm saying that I understand. I'm giving them permission to be where they're at and letting them know that I'm kind of there with them. And if I can mirror their concern, that creates it even more. So it's like if I get a little upset with them, I'm like, oh yeah, that dude was a jerk to you. I can't believe he did that. And if they're upset and I get a little upset like for them, all of a sudden we're sharing an energetic rapport. We're on the same page. And then from there, once we get that sort of connection established, it's so much easier to shift the person, right? I can be like, you know what? Oh yeah, he's such a jerk, but you know what? Sometimes people just have bad days and they say dumb things, right? If I led with that, the chances of it hitting and landing and helping, very low. But if I establish connection first and then say, you know what? Well, sometimes maybe he's just having a bad day sort of thing, they're much more likely to hear it, and it's much more likely to actually impact how they feel. And so the same principle holds true when you're trying to talk to yourself. You have to like really connect with where you're at in the moment if you want to be able to start shifting yourself. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. A lot of people have layers of what I would call meta emotions, which would be emotions about their emotions. So for example, one place I used to struggle with that is when it comes to like sitting down and doing my work, I would feel resistance, right? And then a part of me who felt resistance to sitting down and doing my creative work would get pissed and be like, hey, don't you feel resistant? This is your job. You're supposed to love this stuff. You're such an idiot for not wanting to do it. And then like as soon as I did that, the rapport with myself would break. And then my only option was either just give up on trying to be productive or just brute force my way through. A much better approach is to actually connect with that part and be like, hey, all right, man, I hear you. You don't really feel like sitting down and doing this, but like, it's not that bad, right? Like I know you'd be more comfortable to do whatever. I know you're a little bit worried that maybe the content's not going to go smoothly. You don't really have a super good idea yet, but guess what? We're going to figure this out. We're just going to chill out, put some good like lo-fi music on, and we're just gonna get ourselves into a groove. We're gonna start asking ourselves some questions, and then we're gonna find something, and it's gonna be fine. But like doing it like that, like starting with the acknowledgement of where I was at and accepting that lets everything afterward be much, much more powerful. This is a concept that's very popular in different kinds of like meditation teachings and stuff like that. I think it's like an old like Buddhist sort of idea. It's like, invite all the emotions in as if they were, honored guests, like give them a seat at the table. And this is something that you have to do whenever you're feeling chaotic. If you want to start getting controlled, it's like bring everybody to the table and give them a space. And this takes energy. This isn't something that's like necessarily easy. It can be taxing, because in a lot of ways what you're doing is you're pulling all your strands of energy that are going down autopilot pathways and you're sucking it all into your center. You're bringing it all into your consciousness, and you're letting it all bounce around in there. And a lot of that tends to be emotional. And then it's kind of like you bring everybody to the table. Everyone's kind of fighting and like throwing food at each other and, you know, threatening to leave. But like your rational mind has to be the leader and be like, hey, guess what? We're going to hear from all of you. We're going to work through all of this and we're going to figure out a good plan. Okay. And so going at this self-talk from this perspective and acknowledging how you feel. And sometimes you got to list out all the things, right? Like, you know, sometimes if I'm really, you know, worked up, I'm going to have to like write out each thread, each thought. And this is where journaling is really powerful. Write it all out and then kind of sort through it after the fact. Okay. And this is something that can take a little bit of work. And if you want a full structured sort of approach on how to handle this, then make sure you check out the free guides link in the description and check out my Metascript method guide. You know, that's where I show you like my full structured journaling thing, which is really useful for this kind of stuff. And a lot of guys have used that very, very successfully. So check that out if you're interested in how to really, you know, lay things out in a productive manner. But the final piece to this centered self-talk is that you got to recognize that you got to match intensity. Okay. And this is really important for my guys who are doing kind of essentially addiction work, or, you know, really working with really bad habits and strong cravings and that kind of stuff, is that like in order to really match, you know, to build the rapport with really strong emotions, you got to be showing up in a very strong manner. Okay. Like, for example, if I'm going to really be present with someone who's in the middle of a crisis, I'm going to have to get potentially fairly intense with them. All right. So for example, if, you know, a loved one of mine, you know, they're quitting drugs and they're about to relapse and they're reaching for the needle and they're going for it, like I got to be willing to like tackle them. Right? It's like if I'm with a friend and he's going crazy and he's going, you know, 100 miles an hour about to go off a cliff, I got to be willing to grab him and pull both of us out of the moving car. Okay? Like that's the level of intensity you need to be able to bring at times, right? And once you do that, like once you get the level of rapport, then usually the best effort's about calming things down. But like you almost can't calm things down until you bring things up to match with yourself. And this is why I think a lot of people like they really struggle with strong cravings, is because they're not willing to actually acknowledge the intensity of what they're experiencing or go there consciously. They're just like, I'm going to tune out. That's just too much for me. And then they just let autopilot take over. And then they just, you know, they kind of give up on whatever their goals are and they relapse or act out or whatever it is that they're trying to avoid. And so, you know, you got to be willing to get intense with yourself at times. And then once you do that, then you can start leading yourself in a better direction with the way that you talk to yourself. So the big thing that I want you guys to be practicing between now and the next episode is this, right? Like learning how to give your emotions space. Learn how to translate them, learn how to acknowledge them, learn how to validate them. It doesn't mean you're saying they're right. Okay. A lot of times your emotions are really dumb. Sometimes they're really wrong. But sometimes they also have like very important stuff to say. So you have to treat them with respect. And then once you do that and you say, hey, I like tell yourself how you understand how you feel, be compassionate to yourself, and then try to lead yourself in a better direction. And let me know what happens. You know, I'm interested to hear from you guys because there's a lot more to this. We're still just setting up the core structures and stuff, but eventually we're going to be getting into how exactly do you respond in the most powerful ways. But that's kind of all moot if you're not actually connecting with yourself in the first place. So that's what I have for you guys in this one. So if you enjoyed that topic, please make sure you feed the algorithm, like, subscribe, do all that kinds of good stuff. Oh, shit. Who's that? Bulldog Mindset popping off the $100 donation. Great wisdom here. Let's collab sometime. Hell yeah, man. I'll check your channel out after this. Okay. So what are we doing now? We are going to be checking out, moving into the red pill stuff. Okay. So all these series, they're all still kind of like, these two series are still in kind of like the intro levels. And some people have like messaged me saying, hey, where's the deep stuff? It's coming. It's coming. I want to make these series something that can stand the test of time. I want people to be able to go back and check them out and be able to follow them through, even if they're a complete beginner or newbie to the topics at hand. LJ gave me a $10 dono here. He says, which I'm very appreciative of. Thank you. He says, do you think YouTube is de-algorithming you because you talk negatively about porn? You know, I don't know, but like my channel growth rate has not been great, right? Like my, whatever, I put out for 6 weeks now, I've been putting out videos Monday through Friday, and which has been more than I've ever really done. And I've gained like 150 subs, which seems kind of crazy, right? Like my views are like way lower now than they were even with like the Commander Q stuff. And a lot of you guys like didn't even like that. So I don't know what's happening. I'm getting smacked around somewhere by the algorithm, and I don't know what's causing it, but I do not like it. So I'm going to have to rely on something else to let me go viral, I think. All right. So let's go ahead and get into this. Sorry, I'm trying to like do timestamps here at the same time so that it's easier for my editor. Oh, all right. Well, before we do it, we got one more $20 one here. Thank you very much from One Man's Way. It says, dude, I'm in the Vanguard and overwhelmed with family problems, life problems, and quitting tobacco. What's the first step I should do to take action in your group? All right. So first thing that you're going to want to do is probably work on the thing that's causing you the most pain first. That's always the way to do it, is like take the biggest, most painful problem first. All right. And the only exception to that is if like you've got to do something first to sort of get yourself in a decent position, right? Like maybe there's some sort of short, urgent thing you got to take care of. And then you're just going to want to focus on taking out big problem, first, then a less big problem, then a less big problem, then a less big problem. And you got to give yourself permission to not do it all at once, because you can't. You're going to overwhelm yourself. You're going to burn yourself out. It's like, it's just not going to work. Okay. So you need to really be gentle in a sense with yourself, but committed to whatever that chunk is that you're taking care of. Okay. So, I mean, if quitting tobacco is your biggest issue, then that's what you're going to want to prioritize. And do that first. And don't worry about making everything else perfect until you do that, because you only have so much willpower. And doing big changes like that, like big habit changes, they take a lot out of you. And so if you want a general strategy on how to like do this stuff, the second episode of the Man of Action series is really useful, where I talked about how to like structure this sort of stuff. And then in terms of like baseline habit change, even if you're not struggling with a porn problem or whatever, checking out my reboot regimen from the free guide section, that gives you a good structure of like what sort of essentials you need in place before you start spending your willpower significantly on any other big changes. So I would recommend checking out those two big things and figuring out what exactly you're doing. From there, use the Metascript method guide for your main objective, because that'll help recondition your brain. And then just like connect with Vanguard, post in there regularly, and we're going to get you to where you want to go pretty much, and if you come to the weekly calls, well, that's going to be even more powerful. So that would be my general strategy for you. Okay. All right. Red pill playbook. All right, so the Red Pill Playbook, for any of you guys who haven't seen the first episode, it's going to be a series about helping men navigate the instinctual drives that control our sexual and social dynamics, all right? And in this installment, we're going to be covering the polygamist instinct in men, okay? Like, obviously, it's no secret that men have the desire to sleep with lots of women, right? Like, we all kind of get that, but what are you supposed to do with it? And a lot of the red pill community, they seem to go very hard in one direction, that, you're just supposed to satisfy that urge. Okay. And then we've got the blue pill guys who say, oh no, sleeping with lots of women is bad. Oh, you shouldn't do that. Like my pastor says, and just like goes about it like that. Okay. And the truth is, this really takes something, you got to look at it and you got to logically work through it and you got to figure out what the best move is for you. And so that's what I'm going to be doing in this, little segment here is talking about how do we wrap our brains around this instinctual drive to sleep with lots of women. Okay. So first thing is you got to understand that this isn't just, something bad inside of you. Okay. I see it as like it's primal programming. All right. It's basic, like fail-safe human survival software in a lot of ways. You can think of it like, if everything went to shit, like the grid collapses, we're living in a post-apocalyptic world, in some ways this instinct could be responsible for keeping the human race going. Because men are different in women in that men can impregnate lots of women at once. He can father lots of children at once. Okay, a woman can't do that. A woman can only have, one kid at a time usually. If they have twins, then they can have a little bit more, obviously, but women are very limited in that way. So they have a different reproductive, baseline, primal software. Okay. Men, we don't. We can have lots of children. So that's where that instinct comes from. But obviously that instinct doesn't really have much place in the modern world. Most guys are not trying to see how many children they can have, especially not with multiple women, because that's just going to get pretty expensive. So where does it really show up? I think one of the ways in which this instinct gets most warped is with the way that guys use pornography, because it takes an instinct that would not actually have a lot of place in our lives, and it gives it a massive place. Because every single time that you open, a porn site, you're going to be interacting with, thousands of potential mates according to your brain. And so guys who do that regularly and have been doing that, or just maybe even a lighter way doing it with fantasy and masturbation and stuff since they were young, they're really feeding this instinct and making it stronger. And so part of me wonders all right, how strong would this drive be if we didn't have that be such a prevalent part of our culture? I don't know. It's hard to say. It's kind of like one of those things that's just so embedded at this point that it's difficult to really ascertain, what level of intensity this thing naturally has. I know obviously it's there, but if you're constantly feeding it with hyper novel pornography, high speed pornography, it's definitely going to warp it somewhat. But, that's the way most guys deal with this instinct today, is they just, watch porn and they jerk off and they get constant novelty and they get to pretend like they're constantly having new sexual mates. And obviously I think this is a bad play. A lot of my previous content has been devoted to helping people stop doing that. And if you want to see why, go watch my sexual self-mastery series. I give you plenty of reasons and how to go about that. But this is more about the other side of the conversation, where guys in the pickup artist community or the seduction community, or even if you just look culturally at high status, high powered men, they seem to just want to act this instinct out. They want to sleep with a lot of women as long as they can. And there's this idea that, that's a real man. The real man is the man who can go around and bang lots of beautiful chicks. This is the guy I want to be. And, I get, obviously, the base drive for that. But is that really going to be what's best? Well, there's a huge chunk of guys who think, yeah, that's how I'm going to find my satisfaction with my sexuality, is just by sleeping with lots of women. Okay. There's this idea of raising your notch count. So basically, increasing the number of women that you've slept with, the higher that number is, the better you are. Right. Or you've got kind of the serial dater, which I think is a pretty popular one, or a pretty popular ideal for the people who, may or may not be able to pull it off, is you date a woman, you're monogamous with her for a period, usually that lasts only as long as the infatuation part of the relationship process, which basically, you release all these hormones, you have sex, and then like things are really exciting and sexually charged for a little while, but then eventually, your real problems start to come out, the novelty starts to wear off, and then at that point, usually people break up and they go their separate ways. And the more that you do that, usually the shorter that little honeymoon phase is, and the less satisfying it is, and then you pick up all this baggage and that sort of thing. So that's another way. Obviously, the holy grail in like the pickup and seduction community is the capacity to spin plates, which is the ability to have lots of women that you sleep with, at once. You ever see someone spin multiple plates? Like that's the idea. And then there's the craziest one, which is polyamory, as far as I'm concerned, where you don't just have sex with a bunch of different people, you actually have relationships with all of them, and you try and build like one big like sexually connected sort of family unit thing, which practically just seems crazy. And if you ever follow what any polyamorous people say, they just talk about how hard it is all the time and how they're always jealous and shit like that. I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's not the best move. So what can you do? All right, what's the better strategy? Okay, so some people would just say, just don't do it, man. You got to be committed to your lady. And essentially, I do agree with that. But like, you got to understand why, right? It's got to be something that can't just be done because of your religion or be done because, that's what your mom would be proud of or whatever. It's like, you got to really think about it and make the decision your own. Otherwise, you're a blue pill normie. You're a blue pill chump. And we don't want that. Okay. So if you're going to walk that path, you got to understand why. So let's think about it. All right. Does more sex with more women lead to more fulfillment? What do you think? After the 1,000th random woman that you've had sex with, will that be more satisfying or less satisfying than one of your earlier conquests? Good question, right? My impression is that it'll actually be far less fulfilling, right? Because I think that things, like sex functions pretty reliably, at least the way we respond to it, is that the more we are exposed to a stimuli, especially something pleasurable, the more we become desensitized to it. And so what does that mean? Well, at the very best, it just means that it just becomes less satisfying. And so you hear about people doing this. They kind of have their young age of sowing their wild oats and then realizing this is not great and then settling down. Okay. And some people think that that's what you got to do. You got to go out there and spread your seed and, have some sexual experiences before you settle down with a person. And, I would argue, no, that's not the case. You're just ruining your capacity to bond more intensely, and you're picking up sexual baggage. It's always going to be bouncing around inside your brain and whatever. But, it happens. I've been there, and it's part of the way the world seems to work today. But the thing is that like this path of trying to find satisfaction through satisfying our polygamous instinct, it offers diminishing returns and, at worst, compounding problems. Because think about it, the more you want to keep that game going and the more desensitized you become, then the more energy you're going to have to put into it, right? And this is what I see. And this is what I see with like a lot of the pickup guys, is like how much energy and money and time they put in to trying to sleep with random women. And it's like, yeah, you get a little pop of excitement and maybe a little boost in your self-esteem, but that pop and that boost of self-esteem, they're going to become less important to you as you do it more, and you're just spending more and more time and energy on that kind of stuff, right? And so ultimately what I'm interested in is I'm trying to get the best out of life. I'm trying to get the most fulfillment, most satisfaction. I want to have hot sex, meaningful sex. I want to have it all, as much as I possibly can. But the problem is you can never have it all. There's always got to be sacrifices somewhere. And so my take is that like, all right, actually sacrificing the polygamist instinct gives you access to the highest chance at fulfillment. Now, it's not a guarantee, Okay. This is the thing that you got to be careful of. This is the very blue pill take, is that if you're just a committed good man, then you're going to get what you want. Not exactly. You got to know how to play the game, but like it does give you a chance, because like what happens if you really know how to play the game well and things align well enough, or you stick with it long enough through the failures, through the setbacks, whatever, it gives you the potential chance to have committed relationship. Okay. So there's security there. You don't need to worry about it. It's there. That's a whole host of problems of acquiring, a relationship, getting attention, filtering people out. But if you find the good person, you can stick with them. Ooh, security. That's wonderful. Okay. Then what else can you get? Well, you can have a great sex life. It's actually possible to have a great sex life with a partner, and it's actually possible to keep that going for a long time. And I know this, okay? Like I've been with the same woman for like 10 years. We've been married since 2014, okay? Like, and things are better now than they have ever been. Now, there was definitely some serious and rocky parts, but it just because like the enjoyment of sex does not need to decrease over time. But then you get all this other stuff too, like the relationship, the value of the relationship compounds. Instead of becoming less valuable, like after the 100th hoe that you've banged, like how much do you care about that versus like the woman that you've continuously built and cultivated a relationship with and family with, right? It all starts to compound. It increases, right? There's greater return on the investment. And then once you bring kids into the conversation, I think it's just kind of like, it's a no-brainer, right? Like there is no one that's going to argue that they're doing better for their kids by sleeping around, right? Like it's all the data shows that parents who stay together are better, right? And no kid is going to be like cheering his dad on while his dad's like banging sluts behind his mom's back, right? No kid is going to want to see that ever. In fact, that's probably going to destroy them in a lot of ways. And so, if you really care about your genetic lineage, if you care about leaving a lasting impact on this world, you have to care about your kids and what helps them, what hurts them. Well, I think monogamy helps them. And I think all of the evidence really, really points to that. Now, it's not to say that, again, that this is surefire, right? I can hear the MGTOW guys be like, me, but women suck, me, but they're gonna like betray you and they're gonna divorce you and take all your money. And I'm kind of mean to the MGTOW guys, but they have a point. They can do that. That can happen, even if you do everything right. And that's the crazy thing. That's the thing that turns a lot of people from the red pill to the black pill, is that maybe they really try and do really good things and they get screwed over, all right? Because here's the thing. Women do bad stuff, but so do men, right? People do bad things. And your only option is to be like, okay, well, because there's a chance of bad things happening to me, I'm going to take the path that I am certain will never lead to fulfillment. That's what the people who I see committing to basically, just sleeping around are committing to. They are choosing to essentially like hamstring their fulfillment because they're like, all right, well, at least I want, to be certain that no one can really hurt me too bad. And I want to make sure that I have a consistent access to orgasms. And those two things are most important. And so I'm going to do the path that optimizes that. And therefore, I'm going to give up the chance at real fulfillment and really getting the good stuff. And I just think that's a bad trade. As someone who's really been through some hard stuff in, relationships around sexuality and that sort of thing, like the goodness always outweighs the bad down this path. Like it's not easy, and sometimes things can get really hard. And, if things got really bad to a certain point, maybe I'd be speaking differently because I know how much pain can be involved in these sorts of things. But I think it's like, how high are you willing to aim, right? And how resilient are you willing to be? Because you're going to take your licks no matter what. You're going to have hardships in relationships, but it's kind of just like, well, how high do you want to aim, right? How much fulfillment do you want to hold the space for? And in order to really go for the gold, as far as I'm concerned, you can't do it while holding on to the polygamist instinct. And so you got to kind of treat it like sacrificial fodder. You throw it on the altar, you light it on fire, And yeah, it hurts. And yes, it takes discipline. And yes, you're going to have to like go through that fire periodically, especially if you haven't really quit porn or masturbation or anything like that, because that keeps it going. That keeps that flame burning. And so you're going to have to consistently feel that sacrifice with a higher level of frequency and intensity. But if you quit that kind of stuff and you do the work of finding a good girl and, you know, building a good relationship and learning how to manage yourself in that relationship, which is a lot of what we'll be covering in this series, then I think you can get the best that this life has to offer. So I don't know what you guys think of that, but that's my take on it. And if you got some value out of that, if you liked what I said, then make sure you like, subscribe, you feed the algorithm, you leave a comment, you let me know what you think, okay? So, boom. Let's see. What are you guys saying? Ba-ba-da. All right. So now what we got is a bunch of Q&As. Sorry. So now what we got is a bunch of Q&As from the Vanguard. And it looks like there's some pretty good questions here. So let's go ahead and start diving into them. This first one is from Aeon. Aeon says, what's your opinion about non-ejaculatory orgasms? Here, you know what actually I can do? I can show you guys what I'm doing here. Okay. Aeon says, what is your opinion about non-ejaculatory orgasms in relation to quitting PMO? Seems there are two schools of thought. One says any sexual activity drains dopamine. The other says that it's only ejaculation that saps dopamine and energy levels. In my own experience, it often feels like non-ejaculatory orgasms raises energy levels or rarely balances them, but I'm curious to hear your take on it. I find it strange I can't find anything about this on the NoFap communities, as it could potentially help a lot of people quit PMO and keep the effects of semen retention when they get a girlfriend. P.S. Your email telling me how I wouldn't survive the apocalypse started my longest streak ever. Now 44 days PMO-free streak. Very nice. Okay. So non-ejaculatory orgasms. These kinds of things are like, you gotta, I guess, train for them. And I don't know if I've ever experienced a full one. You know, I've kind of gotten close to them back when I used to jerk off a lot. It's kind of just like take yourself to the edge and clench real tight. And I guess, you know, there's probably ways to get good at that and like make that a thing that you experience regularly. But like my whole thing is like, I've never really been super into the semen retention argument. At least not in relation to like if you're married or if you're in a relationship and you're having sex, because what they've shown is that when you have sex with a partner, like without a condom, you know, penis and vagina kind of sex, there's actually a transmission of stuff, of like, you know, nutrients and things past. Like you actually absorb stuff from your partner through your donger, which is kind of crazy. But it's important to know that, because like the level of depletion you experience, I think, when you're having actual sex with a partner is significantly less than if you're just, you know, shooting wads in the toilet paper. So that's one big thing. And so in that case, like I don't ever think about, you know, ejaculation with my wife as like a draining event, because it's not. Like, yeah, I get like the tired response like immediately afterward, but like other than that, I feel absolutely zero negative effect from it. And that's in fact, in many ways, mostly a positive effect. And I'm really in tune with myself. Like, you know, I've been, you know, pretty self-aware for a long time, and, you know, always paying attention to my body and paying attention to how different supplements affect me. So I would notice it if that was a problem, and it's not. So I think, you know, it's just not a super useful part of the conversation talking about semen retention in general, especially around like masturbation. I think the thing you got to really watch out for is that the issue of masturbation in general, you know, the addiction to orgasm in general, right? That's the thing that needs to be broken. That's why I recommend hard mode, okay? Like you giving yourself a non-ejaculatory orgasm is not hard mode because it's not decreasing your dependence upon sexual pleasure to be okay. And that's the big thing that has to happen for someone who really wants to quit porn and develop sexual self-mastery, is that they have to learn how to actually be okay not getting that pleasure. And if you're just, still giving it to yourself, just not actually releasing seminal fluid, I mean, you're not really doing that much better. I guess maybe you're saving some nutrients and vitamins and whatnot, but like, I don't know, maybe it's good to have a negative effect of getting off from, if you're trying to quit it, it's good to have a negative effect there to like keep you from doing it, right? If you can try and remove all the downsides, well, then all you have left then is the compulsion with no downsides, and then you could just essentially feed that addiction without too much negative benefit. And then that's when addictions become in many ways the most addictive, is when there isn't an immediate benefit. And so you would just have the long-term benefits of not having sexual self-control, and then whatever sort of energy and shit you're putting into that process. So I don't know. I just don't think I see a ton of value in that whole line of thinking, period. All right. Edo. Let's bring this up here. So Edo says, hey, Mark, you mentioned in the first Apex report that you read the book Breath. Upon starting to read it myself, I was immediately struck by how much of a mouth breather I am and how that may be causing me problems. I've been trying to breathe more and more through my nose these past few days, although I'm struggling after decades of exclusively mouth breathing, especially when sleeping. What have your experiences been with changing your breathing and breathing exercises, both from this book and elsewhere? For instance, have you tried any of the Wim Hof breathing exercises with success? How life-changing has it been for you? Have you worked with anyone one-on-one or done any classes to improve yourself? So I haven't done like an insane amount of breath work. I've done a decent amount. When I was I started studying meditation when I was like 14, and I got multiple books on Taoist meditative teachings and yoga teachings and around meditation and this kind of stuff. And so I learned diaphragmatic breathing and breathing through your nose when I was young. But after that book, I did focus more, the big takeaway I got from that was just focusing on breathing through my nose exclusively, especially when I was working out. And I definitely saw a significant increase in my cardiovascular ability. And that was just something I was just all right, when I'm working out, I breathe through my nose. The only thing I realized is I had to blow my nose a lot. And I wouldn't say it has been crazy life-changing. The Wim Hof breathing exercises are kind of neat. I haven't noticed any value to them. I've done them a bunch. Not any value. No, I have. They can help you calm down for sure. And you can train yourself to be able to do a bunch of push-ups with no breath, which is cool. I got to the point, I remember one time at the beach, I did it. I'd been practicing for a couple of weeks and I was able to do 50 push-ups with just one breath. And that was pretty cool. But I don't know. I just didn't see that much value other than just being relaxing. And you can be relaxed doing all different kinds of breathing exercises that don't require you to put your body in such an unpleasant state as the Wim Hof one does, at least from my experience. So I will be actually here probably next month releasing a video on the one breathing technique that I practice pretty much every day. But until then, just focus on breathing through your nose when you can. And if you really want to at night, then put a tape over your mouth, and that should help with your night sleeping. But yeah, breathe through your nose. I think that is absolutely better from everything I've seen. But don't freak yourself out about it. J-Rod says, how do you pursue the journey of dating in a radiant way instead of a vacuous way? I understand the concept of your dignity being separate from your status, but in dating, status is what matters. How do you mentally deal with feeling that you have worth and dignity, but not the status? How do you go about the process of improving your status and dealing with rejections on this journey? P.S. I'm currently on day 9 of my reboot, so I'm not sure I will attempt to date. I just want to sort this out for when the time comes in the future. Okay. So the way you really handle a sense of status insecurity, where you feel like your status is not representative of your dignity, is to care about it and to do something about it. That's pretty much it. Like, you have to have a plan for how you're improving yourself to better reflect your dignity in your status, and you got to be taking that plan seriously. And from there, it's just a matter of like assuring yourself that you are on the right track, and then letting yourself go through the process and staying with yourself as you go through the process. So like that's all there really is, right? And in your case here, a lot of that comes down to patience, right? You got to be like, if you're going through reboot right now, then one of the things that guys don't like to hear is that you're not going to be your most productive self when you're going through reboot, because your reboot is going to be causing all these neurochemical changes. Your dopamine is going to be shot and wonky. You're going to have to be spending willpower on dealing with cravings, doing whatever disciplines you're doing to kind of keep yourself on track. And as that's the way things go, like, you're just not going to be able to crush it in every other place. So it's really about just like treating yourself with the supreme respect you deserve, which is you give yourself the time, the space, the energy, and the sacrifice needed to get your life going in the right way. And as you do that, as you treat yourself someone worthy of that respect, worthy of that effort, and worthy of those rewards, your sensation of dignity is going to rise significantly. You're going to feel much better about yourself. And, you know, as you follow the plan, then your status will also increase, right? And so that's really the heart of it, my friend, is like, give yourself the time to do this and respect it. And, you know, eventually you will have the status and you'll be fine. And to be honest, like, the worldly status, it matters, but only to a degree, right? Like, if you got yourself relatively together, but then you've got a strong presence and a strong sense of dignity, and you can show up in a radiant manner interpersonally, that's going to do a lot more for your dating potential than just like having lots of money. I think. I mean, having lots of money can help you a lot with dating, but if that's all you've got, the people you will be dating are not the people that you probably want to be dating. Okay. Aeon says, I learned somewhere that you pray often as a spiritual practice. Can you describe how you do it and what benefits there are to it? So the way that I pray is I pray the rosary every day because I'm Catholic. And the way I do it primarily is like, I use that as like my time where I'm really kind of doing what I was talking about earlier in the stream with the self-talk, the centered self-talk, is I use that as a place where I kind of delve into my emotionality and figure out what's swirling around in there. What kind of stuff am I ignoring, that's going on in my heart and, my life and whatnot. Like, what kinds of negative emotions do I have? What kind of aspirations maybe am I ignoring, and that sort of thing. And so, like, by doing the rosary, that kind of like keeps the top surface level of my mind occupied as I like say the prayers, but then the rest of my mind is sort of freed up to go deeper, and sort of it creates sort of like a trance flow sort of state where you can do stuff like that. And I also do processing like that where I use my full mind, where I'm not like also praying, but yeah. So that's pretty much what I do. And then I also do like some like breathing meditation stuff, which I would like everything. Like, my goal is to live everything as some sort of prayer. Like, everything is designed to serve my highest conception of goodness, i.e. God. The specific religious symbolism that I use is, I think less important than the intention of connecting to your highest conception of goodness and serving it, devoutly, right? I think every single person should be a devoutly religious person. It depends on what, the way they define the signs, symbols, and rituals of their religion is up to them. But, I think ultimately you got to be connecting with your highest conception of goodness in a, special sort of way, a religious way, a spiritual way. Otherwise, you're going to be missing out big time. Okay. Tony says, what are your reading techniques? How do you read faster, and how do you maintain the focus to read longer without losing yourself in other thoughts? So if you want to read faster, I've done, like, there's books on speed reading. I don't know how useful they are, but there is something that is useful in them, which is like going through a book ahead of time and just like kind of skimming it, like skim through the book, get a picture of like the main headings and ideas, and like maybe read a paragraph here or there that jumps out of you. And what that does is it kind of like builds a framework in your brain that you can then fill in as you read. So I found that makes it so that you can actually read faster. If you want to really go fast, like then you have to like do some stuff around sleep with it. Like you have to really get a clear intention of it. You got to like do what I just described, like before you go to bed, and you have a clear intention of what you're trying to get out from the book, and then you sleep, and then like supposedly your subconscious processes it, which I do believe happens. Like I've noticed that sleep does do something with your cognitive functions, like in terms of like how it rearranges and reorders information in it. And so, you know, and then the next day, then you start going through it. And supposedly, you know, that can help you read faster. I felt that as well. In terms of focusing, I've never really had trouble focusing during reading. So, I mean, I guess the big thing then would be make sure that you're reading stuff that you actually think is interesting. Don't just read something because someone told you you're supposed to read it. Only read books you want to read. Like people have this like, you know, like school-based mentality toward reading. If you're reading for yourself, then read what you want. Read something that's interesting enough to hold your attention. And when it doesn't hold your attention anymore, put the book down and come back to it later. So like, you know, if you're trying to just grind through something, your mind's wandering, then you probably shouldn't be reading that book, or you just maybe shouldn't be reading in that moment. All right. Dalai Lama says, Mark, when I do self-talk, I am 100% of the time only having my rational mind start the dialogue by thanking my primal energy emotional self for giving me energy. Then I listen. What was I going to say? Then I listen, doing the translation. And whatever it wants that is not destructive, I do that. If it says we're hungry, I eat. If it says we're tired, then I take a nap. My rationale is if I keep it happy in small ways, appropriate ways, it won't turn into a monster and by force get what it wants by bullying me and deciding it wants porn or masturbation. In my example, there is only one back and forth. I don't ever keep the conversation going with back and forths. What is poor or weak or doomed to fail in this self-talk approach? And could you sort of say an example of a self-talk conversation you might have with yourself? So in general, this is probably pretty good. The problem where I think it's limited is if there's deeper decision-making processes that like need to happen. Okay. So for example, all right, we'll use this scenario of me deciding to come back and doing some live streaming. So I, sitting down, was supposed to be working on some content and recording a video. Okay. And I sat down to do that. My emotional mind says, I don't want to do that. Okay. So I say, well, all right, I hear you, but why? And it was just like, kind of like giving all this stuff like, oh, it just feels like crummy. I just don't want to. It's boring. It's like, people, we're not even getting subs. All this kind of stuff started coming up. And so I had to respond to each of the points that came up. Right? Like, I had to say like, hey, all right, well, yeah, I know we haven't got a ton of subs since we started doing this kind of stuff, but sometimes, it just, It just takes one. It just takes one video to go viral. And so we're increasing our chances by continuing this pace. To the part that says, I just don't feel like it. It's like, you know what? Yeah, I can hear that. Like there is a bit of lack of energy just between us and the camera. And, it said, and that part said, oh, well, we didn't have that issue when we were doing it live. And I responded by saying, you know what? You're right. How could we figure out how to do that? And then so I had to go back and forth and figure out, all right, what would that look like? How could I pull that off? Do I really want to do that? What are the downsides of doing it live? All that kind of stuff. And all that's a continuous back and forth. So if you're trying to do any sort of more complex decision making, then you're going to need to go back and forth more than once or twice. But when it's like basic stuff like what you've described, I think what you're doing is fine. You just got to make sure that, that's really suiting your needs. Honestly, the worst part about doing these live streams is that I start to struggle a little bit. It's like I'm not used to talking this long. All right. So this one's from the illustrious Not So Fake Lawyer. He says, how can you teach friends to grow? What is the best way to help a friend out with a specific situation and problem if they don't come to you about it? You gotta be careful with that, okay? Because people don't want you to try and force them to change. And if people don't ask you for help, you gotta offer help in a respectful manner, okay? Because, honestly, their problems, that's none of your business, frankly. Unless they bring it to you, it's none of your business. And you just want to try and venture forth kindly and be like, hey, I was looking at this thing. Maybe you want to check this out. Just do it all as an offer. And if they're not interested, let it go. Okay. And if you've got a problem with that, then that's actually an issue on your end, right? This is something that I used to have a problem with. Obviously I like to help people. I like to share knowledge. Like that's literally what I do. But I rarely talk to some of my friends about, the stuff I talk about, and I almost never talk to my family about it because they're not interested. Maybe it's not that they don't, it's not even that they necessarily that they don't care. Just a lot of times they don't really want to hear it. And if I was just going to push it on them, then it would just be annoying. It's like that person who always brings up politics when you don't really feel like talking about politics. And it's just, you got to be careful. You got to be careful of it. And so, just be respectful and offer. And then if not, and you're upset about it, well, then that's your thing. And you got to look at you and you got to be willing to let other people have their journeys. Sometimes people need to go through a period of hurting themselves before they can do anything about it. And so as long as you just offer a hand, be like, hey, I see you're hurting there. I would love to help you if you're interested. And they say, no, thanks, man. Then you withdraw your hand. And maybe you offer it again later if you still see them struggling with the same thing, and maybe they'll change their mind, maybe they won't. But don't force it. That's my take. All right. Brian says, I need some advice on how to discern going hard mode in marriage. Are there any situations where it's not the best option? I know my wife would support my decision to do it, but I'm concerned that it may strain a relationship as time drags on, especially if resets extend the intended time frame. I think loving and forgiving myself would be much more difficult in that scenario, but maybe hard mode would force me to face those shortcomings. So I don't think that doing a year of hard mode where you're failing here and there is good for a marriage. I don't. I do think that a minimum, total minimum would be 1 month, but better would be 6 weeks. Optimum would be 90 days. But getting some period of prolonged abstinence, getting some period where that you've experienced tangibly that you don't need to get that sexual stimulation. You need to have that experience. Now, in a married situation, yeah, I don't think it's good to just be failing for, months and months and months and depriving your wife of that kind of connection. That's not good. So like, maybe you try 3 months at first and you see how it goes. Alternatively, you commit to something shorter, hard mode, and then bring your wife back into it. The time in which you would really want to make sure you really stick to hard mode is if you've got some kind of sexual dysfunction that you're trying to heal and it's not being taken care of by a shorter hard mode. Or if like, when you're having sex with your wife, like stuff that you don't like is coming up, like you have to fantasize about porn or whatever to like be into it, then that means that you still need more sexual rewiring. So yeah, just be reasonable with it. But single guys, you got no excuse. Go ahead and do the full 90 days because that's still the best if you can get it. All right. Addy to Batty. Are there any withdrawals when quitting PMO? I found myself feeling really lethargic and tired. Yes. There's a lot of withdrawals that you can experience. You can get, what is it? How many things are there that you could do or you can experience? Like you can have like genital aching, you can have irritability, you can have inability to concentrate, you can have extreme cravings, you can have mood swings, you can have brain fog. All kinds of shit can happen. So yes, there are withdrawals, but you can also have like crazy spikes of like super feel good chemicals and like moods and stuff like that. Usually they don't last or become more consistent until later in the reboot, post 90 days sort of thing. But yeah, sorry man, it sucks sometimes. That's kind of the cost. So it's worth it. Absolutely worth it to go through it though. But yeah, it's not an easy thing. All right. Vulcan says, in your view, what generates the difference between guys and how many attempts, how long it takes for them to get to 90+ day streak? Conditional in using the tools you teach. Is it just that if you started with PMO younger or for a longer period of time, / it takes longer for you to break the habit? I think, you hit on the two big things. Are you using the tools, and how long have you been an addict? How severe is the addiction, right? So it's like someone who's like a multiple time a day porn user, like every day. That person's just going to take longer than someone who uses it, once or twice a week. Okay. So that's square one. Okay. But then in terms of them successfully, like that's just how long it's going to take the brain to rewire. But like when it comes to adherence of the program, i.e. successfully quitting and not relapsing, that has almost everything to do with how well they work the tools. Yeah. I mean, that's really the heart of it. So it's like, are you using the methodology that I outlined? If you want the full, total, in-depth process, then you get the Reforged Man Course, and you go through the full thing where I give you every single detail about how to do it. If you want the more bare bones approach, then use the reboot regimen and then sign up for the Vanguard, and then use the reboot regimen in combination with the Metascript method, and that's amazing. Will work phenomenally well. Just those two guides. That's the free way that I would recommend everybody do it. Do reboot regimen, Metascript method. And if you want, to add a little bit of extra power, use the anabolic optimism guide as well. So yeah, other than that, it's like, do you have a core regimen? Do you follow it? Do you keep your head in the game? Do you remind yourself what you're doing? Are you practicing self-talk? All that kind of stuff. Not So Fake Lawyer asks, what does my room look like? Maybe I'll post a picture for you guys of it. So I'm in a basement right now. This is behind me is the only part that looks nice. Everything else has like acoustic foam on it, and I've got like my home gym over there with like a shit ton of kettlebells and weights and pads on the floor and that kind of stuff. Adam says, I'm 30 days in and I'm experiencing typical flatline symptoms such as low energy and lack of motivation. How do you manage these symptoms? Ideally, I would be in the process of manufacturing a life I don't want to escape from. However, I'm finding that after I complete my core responsibilities, I'm too drained to be productive in working towards this goal. So yeah, this kind of echoes a lot of the stuff we were talking about already today, that like, you're not going to be your most productive self when you are in the process of quitting porn. How do you manage these symptoms? You just kind of accept them, and you got to be patient, right? And you got to do what you're able to do. So by setting small, reasonable baselines that move you towards your goals, that's going to help you. And so if you're using, you're in the elite tier, so maybe you got the last Apex report about the stack method, then you do that, right? So it's like your hard line and your main line will be around quitting porn and maybe some core productivity. And then you can put any extra stuff in your soft line. And it's just making sure that, like, you know, whatever you're doing is very, very reasonable, and you're not really setting yourself back by trying to do too much. And just, you know, if you just quit porn and do nothing else, that's a major upgrade in your life. That's a major win. Right? And so focus on getting those big wins, and you'll be able to get everything. Just, you won't be able to get it all at once. So yeah, for those of you guys who are wondering what the heck the stack method is, that's something that I'll be releasing a video on here relatively soon. All right, got a few more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more. Jeez, all right. We're too popular here. Okay. Rai says, I'm nearing 130 days of hard mode reboot, and I have a good handle on staying PMO free, so I'd like to focus on my journaling on ingraining other beliefs. How would you recommend phasing out PMO journaling without opening myself up to a relapse? How would I recommend that? Just start doing it like maybe once a week. You do a little check-in with yourself about how you've been with that kind of stuff. And then other than that, you only journal about it if you have an issue. Like if you're, you know, triggered or something, or, you know, if you peaked at something, or you started to slip, or you're, you know, heavily, you know, craving, whatever. It's like you just do it reactively then instead of proactively. And that's it. And as long as you do that and you keep focusing on other stuff and maybe just staying a part of this community and maybe checking back in with yourself every like once a week or something like that, you'll be fine. You know, congrats on the 130 days. So, you know, you're ready to move on to other stuff. Bonds says, this is a good question. What is the worst general advice given on the NoFap subreddits? I've noticed some good things, but a lot of white-knuckling, temporary motivation, or 10 habits encouraged at once on the page, unlike the Vanguard. Are there any outrageous ideas there that never work regarding PMO? I mean, like you kind of hit on a lot of it. A lot of it's just like white-knuckling and just like emotional rah-rah sort of stuff. It's like it's the idea that, like, if you're in the paradigm of thinking that self-control is a matter of motivation, then yeah, you start thinking like, how can I keep the motivation high? How can I keep myself pumped and ready to go crush it? Problem is you can't do that. And so you will always relapse if that's what you're relying on. And that's what a lot of the NoFap subreddit is about. And so that fundamental thought process, I think, is probably the most damaging and flawed thing. You know, it's not bad to be motivated. That's great. You know, that's awesome. But you got to realize that, like, if you really want to quit, then you got to be able to quit when you don't want to, and when you're low motivation and you're tired and you're exhausted and you're stressed, right? And so the answer then is not to try and make yourself feel like on top of the world and ready to go kill it. It's to be able to just be like, no, I'm not going to make my situation worse, right? And so it can take a bit of doing to do that, but you know, you got to be willing to go on that journey. All right. The Rob says, question, I've been tracking my time with certain apps on my computer, and it comes up that Discord and YouTube take multiple hours of time on the daily. I think it might be the next thing that I tackle after my reboot. Day 65, let's get it. Very nice. I I do acknowledge that being in the Vanguard and another Discord community around self-improvement does have positive impact, but I do think there are diminishing returns at a certain point. Do you recommend just limiting the time I am on there, or just blocking out a certain time to engage in the activity on the Discord? I have never done moderation of a habit before. It has always been 100% removal or installation of a new habit. I think it's just like the simplest thing is just, don't log in until you're done for the day, or maybe you give yourself a break at lunchtime and you let yourself kind of catch up on the Vanguard and that other self-development thing. And then you do it, right? Like, just the big thing is just you don't want to have it just sitting there floating all day if it's a problem for you. And I have it there, but like, it's a little bit different. Like, I'm not actively participating in a kind of compulsive manner. Like, I do it because it's kind of like my job to monitor the community, at least try to, at least do it somewhat, right? And so, I will interact with friends every once in a while, and sometimes that does get distracting. And so when that happens, I actually just close the app. So that's the thing, is like you gotta know when it's time to just remove that instant access for yourself. You don't want to be giving things necessarily free access to your attention. And if it's just sitting there and it can constantly ping you with an alert, then that's giving it free access, and you're basically giving it permission to interrupt you. And you shouldn't be doing that if you don't want to be interrupted, right? So maybe you just got to carve out the right times for it. Same thing with YouTube. Like, keep YouTube in the evening. Keep it when you're done. Keep it when you're ready to like chill out for the day. That's what I would do. And that is what I do mostly. So hopefully that helps you. Isnick says, so is a negative emotion the same as the black hole? When you're experiencing a negative emotion, do you use self-talk to process it first and then use cut? Or do you first cut and then use self-talk to process the negative emotion black hole if it's still there? Or do you not need to use these at the same time? I'm a bit confused because cut will process any negative emotion, right? So would we even need to use emotional processing if we just cut? Or do they go hand in hand when we use them together in order? Hope this made sense. No. So a negative emotion is not the same thing as a black hole. The black hole is the sensation of longing and lack, specifically. And that's what comes up when you say, I'm not going to do the expedient thing or the pleasure-seeking thing. And instead, we're going to do the right thing, okay? And in a moment of craving, that will create a sensation of lack inside of you. That's the black hole, okay? And so usually with most negative emotions, there is some kind of impulse that we have to say no to. And so in most negative emotions, there is some kind of thing that we can do to trigger the black hole, and then we want to use the cut method to go and connect with that feeling of lack and longing and then transmute it. Okay, for those of you guys who are listening, you don't know what the cut method is, I'm going to be doing a video probably next week on it. I'm hoping next week I'll be able to get it done. If not, it should definitely be the next week, actually. I'm going to try really hard to do it. So I have another one on it, Man of Action, I think number 5, The Heart of Action, where I explain it. It's probably my most powerful technique. So go check that out. It's about transmuting cravings, how to deal with them. So back to Isnick. So what you would normally do is you say no to whatever sort of wayward desire you have, trigger the black hole, dive into it, process it, be present with yourself, tell yourself what you're going to really do. And then, yes, you would emotionally process anything left over. So it's like if it's a porn craving, you say no, trigger the black hole, become present with the black hole, try and work through it, relax, tell yourself you're going to be okay, that sort of thing. And then if there's something else there that's like, it's loneliness or stress or boredom, then you're going to want to probably try and talk to that, translate that, and respond to it as a leader and a friend. So that's the general framework. Don't worry about trying to do it all perfectly. The big thing is just like translate your emotions, respond to them as a leader and a friend. And if you run into any kind of part where you're butting heads and there's a lot of resistance, and chances are you need to like go through the cut method and try and make it a more visceral. You need to create a neurochemical event, which is the purpose of the cut method. All right, 3 more. Bond says, in addition, he's following up. What is the worst physical consequence of relapse you've heard of, as well as emotional? I think hearing this again as a reminder would be a good deterrent. So worst physical consequences of a relapse? I don't know if I've heard too many physical consequences. I know people like they've had like really bad like brain fog and they just feel like shit, that sort of thing. Because if they like go on a binge, they feel really bad that way. Emotionally, I mean, guys have, I've seen guys go like semi-suicidal because they relapse, which is not good. You shouldn't be, that's a complete rejection of what I stand for. It's like, you're unconditionally worth your own effort. Even if you screw up, it doesn't make you bad. It just means you did something bad. It doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you made a mistake. You did something wrong. Like you got to grow from it, got to learn from it. And so people who take that really seriously and, they beat themselves up for it, like that's really the worst stuff. And you want to stay away from that. But like, the big thing is you don't want to be thinking about the negative consequences of the relapse as your main source of motivation. You can think about that, but the big thing you want to be drawing on is the negative consequences of keeping porn in your life, because that's why you should be quitting, because you want to live a better life. And what do you stand to gain then, right? That's what you want to be reminding yourself of. Nikhil says, hey, Mark, I've been really struggling with my eating habits. I want to slowly stop eating out and incorporate a few meals during the week. Over the last 2 months, I've made minor diet changes like improving breakfast by adding more fruits, nuts, etc. But where I struggle is with meal prepping. I've struggled with this task, which requires a lot of effort once or twice a week. When I do meal prep every now and then, it seems like a grind. Any tips on how I can get this habit down? Good question. I've actually been kind of playing with this myself, and I think the best thing that I can give you is to learn how to like the process. Like learn how to get into cooking. Don't just look at cooking as a means to an end to some dietary goal. Like actually start playing around with the idea of like, what if you liked cooking? What if you liked meal prep? What if you were into food? What if you were into making good food? Like that's the only way I see it happening is like either you make it so efficient where you can just like not have to worry about it, like pay for a meal prep service or something like that, which is expensive, but if you got the money, then it's worth it, and you don't feel like investing in it. Otherwise, it's learn to like cooking or have like a wife who likes cooking, right? And have her do your meal prep. That's kind of like the only options. Otherwise, like there's going to be such a lack of emotional investment in the process that you're not going to be able to get yourself to do it. Like you have to tie it to some sort of motivating thing where you see it as a good thing and you can feel it as a good thing. And it might take a little bit of practice of pushing yourself at first, but like, check out my Man of Action series on brain bridging, because that's kind of what you got to do is you got to think like a person who loves meal prep and try that out. Caleb asks, in regard to the stack method, how much do you put on your dashboard for tracking? So with your examples, is there overlap for some of the goals like content creation? Do you have an entry to track for each tier, hard, main, soft line? Or do you keep a mental note of when it is hard line versus main line and only track once? It kind of depends on what you're doing, right? Like, so what I'm doing now, I've only been like tracking one thing lately. And so I don't even have a weekly dashboard, which is the first time it's been like that for a while. But what I do is just when I'm doing my daily journal entry, I just create like a little bar in my notebook. And my notebook's, got grid paper. So it's like, measured out. And so my main line goal or my hard line goal, which is what I absolutely commit to doing, is 4 hours of very focused work, okay? And so I track that. And then I have an extra bonus hour on there that's like my hard line, or sorry, my main line. And so it's like you kind of have two goals. You have like your like the thing you're absolutely going to force yourself to do, and then you kind of got the bonus that's like you do if things are going well. And so that's all I track today these days. But when I'm trying to change multiple things at once, then I will like do like a spread, like a habit spread where I have like, you know, Sunday through Saturday, like, you know, each of the habits listed out. And then next to the habit, I will kind of distinguish between what's the hardline goal and what's the mainline goal. So it's like maybe, you know, if I was just doing the time we're talking about here, it's like I would just do focused work. And then I would have 4, 5. And so I know 4 is the minimum I want to hit and 5 is kind of like the ideal I want to hit. And it can be as simple as that. So you don't need that necessarily, but it's just, you know, it's a flexible thing. It's like you figure out what works best for you. And like I said, guys, I will be covering the stack method here soon for all of you guys, and I think you'll like it. So all right, we did it. We got through the Q&A. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you leave a comment. Got to feed that algorithm because holy shit, it's been screwing me over. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing the Q&As in the live stream. I think I'm going to try, if I can, get more like smaller topics to go off of. So, you know, follow me on social media, you know, be a part of the Vanguard, that sort of thing. And, you know, if you ever hear like interesting stuff you want me to check out or riff on or whatever, maybe we can even do like, do some reaction stuff. That could be fun. Just as like a part of the stream, like you guys can send me videos that we can watch together and I can react to. Especially any kind of cultural stuff. Like, you know, this world is crazy today. And I think that there's a lot to say about it. So I'm excited for this. Next week, I'm going to aim to do these streams on Thursday. And over the following week, you'll see clips from this lifted and posted on the channel. I just think this is a more efficient way to be producing the content and whatnot. But I'm hyped. Hopefully you guys are too. And I'll see you all in the next one. Ooh, yop.